Hello, folks, and thanks so much for pressing play on today's episode of Stand Up. I think you probably know how hard I work on the show, but as we enter the fourth year of the podcast, I just want to put out a special thanks to you for sticking with me for all this time. All of you who have, folks who have come, folks who have gone and come back. I'm so grateful and appreciative to have you here, and thinking a lot about new things I may do with the show, and obviously always trying to find new guests. Always want to hear your insights on all of it, but I think we're going to have a lot of really exciting changes and hopefully growth on the program this year, and I am so excited to have you along with me. I realize I hadn't really acknowledged the anniversary of the show. A few of you have reached out and said things and congratulated me, and I just wanted to say thank you. So as I get started here, I've got another first-time guest on the show. Yesterday, of course, we had Assam Ahmed of the New York Times, the author of this great new book, and some really great feedback on that. If you hadn't heard that yet, he's on the show for the first time yesterday. And today, I've got Canadian-American now, comedian Graham Kay joining me for the first time. I thought it would be really interesting to talk with him because he is starring in his own one-man show called Pete and Me, where he uses comedy, humor, levity to talk about growing up with an autistic brother, exploring their relationship from childhood through today. It's in the New York Comedy Festivals and the Montreal Comedy Festival. Graham has been on The Tonight Show, The Late Show, and Colbert, and I think The Late Show and Colbert are the same thing, sorry. But of course, issues around autism, all of it is something I've always been really interested in. I know we have so many listeners who have kids who are on the spectrum. Of course, Cindy and Megan and Tina, and I'm sure there's people I'm forgetting, but I was thinking of you guys when I booked him and even more during the conversation, and so I hope that you like it. But I thought I actually had never met him, but as you'll see at the top of the interview, apparently we had. Anyway, I think you'll love my conversation with him. Very, very human, thoughtful, and funny, as well as thought-provoking. That is coming up. If you want to skip over the news segment, then my conversation with Graham starts at about 20 minutes in. But right now, let's get to some headlines. I got some clips for you, and then on to my conversation with Graham. And, of course, I can't do this without you. This podcast is entirely listener-supported. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic is the place to go to sign up for a $5 subscription or more. You can always pay more if you want or can. Always appreciated and grateful. All right, let's get to it with the headlines from the last 24 hours. We've got 3 days until a government shutdown. Well, I guess 4 days, Friday. House Republicans, Democrats, and the White House have all panned the new House Speaker Mike Johnson's complex two-tiered plan to temporarily fund the government. Apparently, nobody's happy, so the countdown continues. The cycle of madness continues. Also yesterday, the Supreme Court issued its first ever code of conduct following months of ethical controversies, obviously with Clarence Thomas and more. And at first glance, it was good news. And then when you read it, it was not really so much a code of conduct in that it can't apparently be enforced in any way. I've got some audio reactions to that, but also would like to announce my code of conduct. It is that I can do anything I want, and it doesn't matter what happens. I hope you like my code of conduct. Super ethical. Just call me Socrates. Was he ethical? Okay. President Biden urged Israel to take less intrusive action. Talk about choosing your words super carefully at the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza, saying hospitals must be protected. Thank you for taking that bold stance, President Biden. Donald Trump Jr. returned to the witness stand to continue to embarrass himself in the $250 million civil fraud trial, while the Attorney General was in the audience smiling like a Cheshire cat the whole time. Letitia James is the GOAT. Don Jr. called his father a genius and a visionary and an artist with real estate who creates things that other people would never envision. And the rest of us are going, I feel like he's envisioning Hitler a lot lately. So a lot of people are talking about him channeling Adolf Hitler's speech over the last couple of days, or at a rally over the weekend of his. I've got some audio from Ruth Bader Ginsburg on that. Senator Tim Scott shocked the world yesterday when he suspended his campaign, his presidential campaign, to spend more time with his crisis actor girlfriend. Representative Abigail Spanberger, a prominent Virginia Democrat, announced that she would run for governor, leaving open a competitive House seat, but giving a lot of hope to Virginian Democrats. And sadly, Marianne Trump Barry, the former federal judge and older sister of Donald Trump, died at 86. I say it's sad because she lived that long. Man, they have some good genes. But also, apparently, she hated her brother and thought he was cruel and mean and terrible, at least at one point. She was quoted as saying something like that. All right, I think that's all the headlines I've got for you from yesterday. Let's get to some of that audio. First, of course, you have heard a lot about Trump's speech the other night. Everybody is saying he's basically quoting Hitler and sounding like an authoritarian that he is and will be so much worse. Well, the great expert historian on authoritarianism, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who I haven't talked to in a long time. I got to reach out to her. He was great on Joy Reid's show last night on MSNBC. Listen to this.
How do we fight against what Trump wants to do when all the Republicans who would be willing to stand up to him are gone? They've left Washington. They've left the party.
Yeah, it's very difficult because the party has become an autocratic entity, and it is relying on corruption and the autocratic playbook, lying, corruption, and violence and threat as a form of government. And the reason they don't care if they take positions that are unpopular is that they don't really plan in the long run to depend on the popular will, to depend on elections. The end game of an election denial is to convince Americans that elections are not necessary or the best way to choose their leaders. So they plan on having a kind of electoral autocracy where you have elections, but they don't mean anything. So you get Tommy Tuberville saying, oh, we shouldn't have elections. You get Michael Flynn saying, maybe we won't have an election. This is all kind of psychological warfare, drip, drip, drip. And when you put it together with, Trump kind of marketing violence as something positive and all the other things going on. It's just, I think that civic education, which is what I've been trying to do since 2016, why I wrote my book Strongmen, is absolutely essential because, as you said, people have a kind of amnesia. They don't remember that Mussolini was an enormous star. He had a syndicated column, Mussolini, courtesy of his patron, Hearst, who was a right-wing, billionaire or whatever. And he reached 1,000. It went in 1,000 newspapers for 7 years, Mussolini. And of course, we know that Hitler was very popular. So we can't forget this, and we need to come to terms with this strain of authoritarianism that is in our own country and how it can be activated and is being activated now.
Very well said by the great Ruth Ben-Ghiat on MSNBC last night. And let's stay there with Joy Reid. Obviously, I was watching a little bit of that. Actually, I saw that my friend Elie Mystal was going to be on to talk about this new Supreme Court Code of Ethics. So let's go back to Joy and let's hear what our friend Elie has to say about this.
Elie, how seriously should we take this ethics code? Let me just read a little bit before I let you answer that. It says here, the absence of a code, however, has led in recent years to the misunderstanding that the justices of the court, unlike all other jurisdictions in this country, regard themselves as unrestricted by any ethics rules. Your thoughts?
Misunderstanding. So we were confused about whether or not Supreme Court justices can have their mothers' houses paid for by wealthy Republican donors. Oh, well, thank you, John Roberts, for elucidating that, in fact, they can. Because that's the real problem with this ethics code. There are no ethics involved in the code. There is nothing in this 14 pages of weak sauce that restrains people like Clarence Thomas from doing everything that Clarence Thomas did. Nothing about not taking gifts from wealthy donors or taking trips or taking free vacations or taking free houses. Nothing in there is unethical according to the Supreme Court. So I would call this ethics reform toothless, but that's a bit of an insult to people who have dentures, right? Because it's weaker even than that. This ethics code is best understood as only Clarence Thomas can decide whether or not Clarence Thomas violated Clarence Thomas's rules. All right, it's like Ricky Henderson wrote this for himself. And so with that as the setup, the idea that this weak sauce ethics rules, so-called ethics rules, there's no enforcement mechanism, as you pointed out. It's still up to the individual justices to decide whether or not they should recuse. There's no peer review. There's no independent third-party adjudication about any of these potential ethics violations. So what is it for? And Joy, you've hit it exactly right. This has an audience of exactly one. Senate Judiciary Chairman Dick Durbin.
Yeah.
This is John Roberts NM's attempt to push Durbin off of his investigation, an investigation that, by the way, the Supreme Court justices are still refusing to show up and testify about, right? It's to push him off their investigation and to give ranking Republican member Lindsey Graham something else to scream, cry about when he tries to justify the unethical behavior of the Supreme Court.
Oh, he's so good and smart and satisfying. And I just texted him, actually. I was like, I didn't get the Ricky Henderson reference. Talking about stealing bases, they were stealing. I don't know. He'll get back to me. If I'm not done by the time he gets back to me, then I'll tell you tomorrow whatever he was talking about. All right. Now, here is Senator Tim Scott on Fox News last night, shocking the host, former Congressman Trey Gowdy, when he said he's not running anymore.
I'm looking forward to getting back on the campaign trail.
Now, that was weird because he said, I'm looking forward to getting back on the campaign trail. In about 30 seconds, he says he's not running anymore. So maybe he means for other candidates, but that just was a little misleading.
Without any question, Trey, one of the things I would recommend to every single American, I know it's not possible, by the way, if you ever want to love your country more, run for president.
Okay, I really want to love my country more. Guess I'll just run for president. Oh, wait, I need $10 billion? Oh, I guess I'm not going to be able to love my country more.
Traveling this country, meeting people has been one of the most fantastic experiences of my entire life. I love America more today than I did on May 22nd. But when I go back to Iowa, it will not be as a presidential candidate. I am suspending my campaign. I think the voters who are the most remarkable people on the planet have been really clear that they're telling me not now, Tim. I don't think they're saying, Trey, no, but I do think they're saying not now. And so I'm going to respect the voters, and I'm going to hold on and keep working really hard and look forward to another opportunity.
You are suspending
Trey?
your presidential campaign. You have plenty of money. You have the highest approval numbers of any candidate that is running, and you're a couple of states away from coming to a state where you are beloved, and you are suspending your presidential campaign.
Romans 8:28 is such an important scripture. It says that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. I think the message is clear for me right now. I am indeed suspending the campaign, but I am going to remain as committed to making sure that this country chooses the right person by enjoying the journey of just helping people everywhere throughout South Carolina and through our country. We have an amazing country. I'm very thankful to be in America. We should all be proud of this country. I was a kid, Trey, as you know, nearly failed out of high school as a freshman. And here I am, was running for president just a few minutes ago.
That's such a weird... that's an authentic laugh by me. I forgot that he said that. I usually pull the audio and then I listen to it in real time with you here to make sure it's... And I forgot that he said, until a few seconds ago, I was still running for president. I was still running for president until a few seconds ago. Okay, well, you got to hear this. If you haven't heard it, I listened to it 10 times already, I think. And so it doesn't get old. This is, I guess, former Republican, longtime Republican. He still seems like a conservative Republican. His name is Tim Miller. And he's over at the Bulwark. You probably know who he is, right? He met up with Carrie Lake yesterday, and he confronted her about her election denialism and all her stupid nonsense claims that conservative students are being silenced. And he just had the perfect answer to that right here at the top. But this whole, I think, about 2-minute clip is so good. At one point, towards the end there, she reaches out and like grabs his hands just to try to she touches him, and he's having none of it.
I'm not okay with that. I want you to be able to talk whatever you guys say on the circus. I want to be able to have conservative students not being shamed on our universities. This is like a
golden age for conservative students. It's the best time ever. If you're a conservative student and you want to talk, you have huge platforms. I went to Turning Point USA. All these kids have huge audiences. That's great. That's fine. They're all speaking. Their speeches as a threat. There weren't any cops coming to shut down the Turning Point USA thing. But here's the thing. Say you care about the fentanyl crisis.
I care deeply.
Okay, right. So if you care so deeply about this, couldn't you actually do something about it if you stopped the bullshit about the last election? If you just acknowledged that Trump had lost and acknowledge that you lost, you might be in good shape. Probably would have won your governor's race had you just talked about things people cared about instead of the election fraud. So sometimes don't you ever think to yourself, I wish I could just stop talking about this fake thing that Donald Trump made me make up so that I could actually talk about the stuff that's important? About that. I agree. I wish we could deal with it.
I talked about that all the time at the campaign. Sorry you weren't with me. I'm sorry you weren't with me every step of the way. People of Arizona understand. They know me, and they care about me, and I care about them. And I care about them. Getting them better, freeing the people who are held political prisoners. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I think you are still a little. That's okay, though. Good to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you. That's right. I'd love to.
We have some areas. We agree on the fentanyl thing.
And
then you get it. But the other stuff is what you have to do.
I'm sorry I'm not making you happy.
The other stuff is what I don't know why you're touching me. The other stuff is what you have to do to win.
Sorry, I'm a mom. I'm sorry, I'm a mom.
That's okay. I like to touch too, but in an interview setting.
I'm sorry that we don't agree on everything. But what I am not sorry about is that I think that I do believe that we can agree that we both love America.
We do. Well, I know that I love America. I do think that you are okay with that. End of the American. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
All right. She knew she was beaten. She knew she was beaten at every single point she made. That guy had her dead to rights, and that's why I really loved it. That's not the first time they've tangled. He's been covering her, I think, for a long time. All right. Well, that's all I've got here for you at the opening, the news, the clips, and now a little bit of the comedy from the opening of John Oliver on Last Week Tonight, where, of course, I am the audience warm-up comedian. This aired last night on HBO, but you can watch the whole thing on YouTube. I guess they must have a joint deal with them. I've never really understood that. But here in the U.S., you can watch it on YouTube. I highly encourage you to watch the whole show. It's so good. He covered last night the Israeli-Hamas war, and here's just the opening.
We're going to dive straight in with our main story tonight, which concerns the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. A sentence which is a terrible way to start a comedy show and a great way to end a first date. And look, before we even begin, I know a lot of the conversation surrounding this has been extremely heated. You may have seen friends or co-workers posting hot takes that have shocked you. Suddenly that guy who offered you coke at a wedding is writing thesis-long Instagram stories on the two-state solution. Kathy from work is posting something that's anti-Semitic in a way that you really hope she doesn't realise. And it's all shoved in between your favourite influencer showing whole while also calling for a free Palestine. The internet is a wild place. Things are understandably very tense right now, and it seems like everyone is finding themselves making mistakes. And I do mean everyone.
Meanwhile, Kmart has had to pull one of its Christmas items off the shelf because of its unfortunate wording. The shopping giant selling ham, Christmas calico bags with the slogan Merry Ham-Miss, which appears to be too similar to the name of the terrorist group Hamas.
Yeah, that is too similar. It'd be like naming your child John Blaine Gacy. It's too close for comfort. But spare a thought for Australian Kmart there. How were they supposed to know that Hamas was going to launch a terrorist attack so close to the ham mass season? I think we all definitely celebrate and have heard of before. It feels like ham mass starts a little earlier every year, doesn't it? One day it's Hamaween, the next your neighbour's hanging up Hamas lights. And celebrities have also found out the hard way that it's easy to get things wrong. A few weeks ago, Justin Bieber posted praying for Israel over a picture of a devastated city that he apparently didn't realise was actually Gaza. He then deleted the post and reposted the same prayers over a blank background, which, as we now know, thankfully did solve everything.
All right, well, those are just some of the lighter jokes at the beginning. He goes in real detail on the history and blames the leadership of Hamas, of course, and Netanyahu as well. And I learned a lot from that show last night. I highly recommend you go watch it. But right now, it's time to get to our very special guest. He's joining me here on the show for the first time. Really excited to have him joining me. He's a very funny comedian. You may have seen on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, The Late Show with Steven Colbert. He's performed at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in his native Toronto, Canada, and the New York Comedy Festival, where he's performing his one-man show, which is what we talk about, Pete and Me, a non-depressing look at autism and family. He explores the relationship from childhood through today with his brother, how it's changed him in so many ways. We had a great conversation. I really like this guy. He's very, very funny. You should go support his stand-up, and it would mean a lot to me if you let him know that you appreciated it too. I think this is super enlightening. I think it's very important. Help me understand more, and I was very happy to have Graham K on the show for the first time. So let's do it right now. And we are on with Graham K, a very, very funny comedian from Canada who has got a great one-man show. Thank you for joining me. We've never met, so I'm really excited to have you and talk to you.
We have met, Pete.
Oh, shit.
Yep.
Was
that bad guy? No, I'm kidding. We only met once, maybe twice. I have the worst memory. I don't know why I remember this, but we met at the Friars Club.
Oh, I've only been there a few times. Oh, at that gathering where there was a bunch of comedians. Okay, I do remember that.
Yeah, like Mike Costa, the guy, from the Daily Show, he would do like a come hang and have crackers and coffee at the Friars Club. And he would invite like a random group of comedians comedians. We usually know each other, but he would invite this group that didn't know each other, and we'd all just sort of hang out and eat crackers at the Friars Club.
I only went to that once, and so I remember. I feel horrible for not remembering you now, but I'm glad we said it on the record because it does happen sometimes. It was one time, but I do remember going there and leaving going, I liked every one of those guys, and that is not normal. It's clearly a curated group. Michael is a good guy, and he curated a group of people he thought were not rapists.
Yes. And so far, so good.
I mean, like good guy, like a lot of guys. There was, I think, a few women there as well. But I mean, I get very judgmental around a lot of comedians, around a lot of male comedians who are not all, criminals or anything. Just like, I can't.
Yeah, sure. There's something about being on the road a long time and never settling down that doesn't age well, I don't know. And I'm in the midst of that right now. And, we'll see.
To each their own. Well, listen, I'm psyched to talk to you about your show and your life. I think it's really important, and I think you're a deep and thoughtful guy about it. And so Pete and me, a non-depressing look at autism and family. You grew up in Canada. Your younger brother was diagnosed with autism at some point. It's a really interesting, I think, important time to have been diagnosed with autism. You can talk a lot about it in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, why do a show talking about your brother and your relationship?
Well, I was just trying to think of like what makes me different. And I think that the experience of being my only sibling, having a pretty profound disability, gave me a different perspective on life. And I also realized in doing the show that no one ever talks about the family. They always talk about the person with the disability, but what happens to the family? How does that affect them? And in particular, the siblings after the parents get old or pass. So I'm going to have to move back to Canada. I live in New York right now. I've wanted to be a professional comedian living in New York. I wanted to be basically Jerry on the show Seinfeld. I wanted to have like his character's life on the show Seinfeld. And if you don't remember the show, he is a comedian. He lives in New York. He has a cool apartment. He goes away on the road like every 2 weekends. He's on TV like once or twice a year. He's a touring comic. And I was like, that is the life for me. And I've done all of those things. I have a cool apartment. I live in New York. I have a car. I'm on TV once or twice a year. And I'm going to have to give it all up to go take care of my brother pretty soon. My parents are 75. They're in good health, knock on wood. But, they're 75. It could be a week. It could be 10 years. My mom doesn't walk enough. I'm trying to get her to walk more so I don't have to quit comedy. It's a lot,
How much of your time and effort is focused on the health of your parents so that you don't have to go take care of your brother in Ottawa?
Once a week. Did you walk? Did you go for? Graham, I'm 75. I do a lot of puttering around the house. I did laundry. I'm like, Mom, when you came to New York, you couldn't walk longer than 4 minutes at a time. We had to get an Uber. It cost me $8 million. We took an Uber everywhere.
It's
she's
crazy
just like, for her, It's like a magic car that comes. Like, no, I pay for this.
It's crazy to think about. It's hard to imagine what that must be like for you and so many other people. But let's talk about your life growing up with your brother, and then we can talk about the potential future, because nothing's baked in, right? I mean, you're touring right now with your friend Nate Bargatze at arenas. Like maybe you make enough. Maybe Nate makes so much that he just takes care of your brother for the rest of time. But I mean, like, the bottom line is you're a great comic. You're very successful. You're hardworking. You'll figure out how to make this work. It is my guess. I mean, you'll never stop doing comedy. You just won't maybe have the New York City apartment.
It's true. It's like, I will always be doing stand-up, but I have done stand-up comedy for a few years in Canada, and Canada's a great place to live. Great place to live. We have no show business. We have no show business because we have the same accent as America, so all of our networks just import all of the American media. No other country has that problem except for us. So if you want to be in show business and be Canadian, you literally have to move to America or the UK. Everyone makes that decision at around like year 4 or 5 in comedy, whether they're going to go to the UK or America. I chose America. I wanted to be on the Tonight Show, Johnny Carson. I did it. You know, it was with Jimmy Fallon, but he's my Johnny Carson. And you know, it'll be an adjustment. I'll probably have to get a day job, but my last like office job, a lady got a BlackBerry beside me, and we all crowded around and looked at it.
Like, a long time ago.
I just learned what Slack was like a week ago.
Yeah,
everyone.
I don't know you well enough, and it's not for me to say this, but I've watched your stand up, and I know it's increasingly hard to make money. I mean, you're obviously making a pretty decent living, but it gets harder and harder, and then some things happen. And I can just like, I don't think you'll ever probably go back to that. I think when you're opening for a Nate Bargatze, it's because he thinks highly of you. He thinks you're as good as him in many ways, I'm sure, which means other people think that, which means you always work as long as you're not a creep. So I bet you end up living wherever you want to live and doing the kind of gigs you want, but it's not necessarily.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I don't think you're going back, but it's a good fear, I guess, to have to motivate you, or it's a really unhealthy anxiety. For me, it is. I have to deal with that every day too, worrying about not being able to do the thing you love. Let's talk about your brother and growing up. Tell me about what it was like when you're a little boy, and I guess at some point you realize your brother's different, your family's different. How are all the friends on that leafy suburban street treating your family? I just imagine you in a leafy suburban Ottawa. 19.
It was leafy. We grew up downtown. It was like no one. Yeah, we grew up in a very sort of urban environment, and we had a very tight knit block. We used to have block parties, and our block was really great. Everyone really helped. It was a real community. Helped each other out, and also, you know, my brother. A lot of them. Mothers would make sure that their younger children would play with Peter. But then, you know, the kids would turn 10, 9, 10, 11, and just, you know, Peter's intellectually like a 6 or a 7-year-old, and he just isn't going to get past that. So they would get older and then get really annoyed and stop playing with him, and then he'd have to find some. Then he's like 15, hanging out with 7-year-olds, and you know, it's just difficult. It's difficult when there's nobody on his level. So, you know, the families did as much as they could, but after a while it was like he needed to go to like special schools and stuff to talk to, you know, but he definitely, we had a bunch of mothers and fathers, mothers in particular, on front porches, making sure everyone's wearing their helmet and taking care of each other, and no one's teasing him or anything like that. No one would ever tease him because they all grew up with him on my block anyway.
Yeah, that's number one, I feel like, probably in this case for you and anybody in that situation, is community. What is your community like? How does your community help or hurt your brother and your family? That's what it sounds like.
You need a pretty tight knit community. It's tough for a lot of people who don't have that. We were upper middle class, and so, you know, we had We had resources. We had not only the people on our like block, but we had like, family and everything. But I just, there's so many kids who just have like a single parent who has to work, 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week. And it's like, they just don't have the time to advocate for their child, to put them in the right schools, to figure out what the right school is, to push. Canada has a lot more stuff than America does to take care of these kids, but it's still not like Sweden or anything like that. Like, you got to have boots on the ground. You got to advocate for yourself. If you're poor, your child is not going to have as much stuff, just because it takes time to find the government programs. They're not finding you, and you don't have the education or the wherewithal to talk to these people even. Right. So it's a lot. It's hard when they're young, and then when they're like 10 to 21. And this is the same in America. There are the school system will take care of them, and put them in. There's like something for them to do, but not all are created equal. But the resources, you're saying, at a certain age, schools are supposed to. They're mandated to provide resources at this age. Yeah. And then and this is universal. After 21, whether it's Canada or America, there's nothing. So then it falls back on the parents, on the brother, and we got to figure. That's when we got to. Okay, now what? Now what do we do? How do we get? So my brother, luckily, he's part of like a special needs network, which is like just a group that is government funded, run by people who are paid. This is their career, and volunteers, and they basically teach kids how to live, work, and play. They're called Live, Work, Play. And then they help him get a job. So he has a part-time job. But in terms of housing and everything like that, my parents have to figure all that out. All of my inheritance, my parents said last Christmas, is going towards him. So, and it's better than the alternative. But for most millennials, our retirement plan is our parents' house. And I don't have that. I have it's going into a trust for my brother, so he's not homeless. Imagine if he was poor. When they told you that, what was that like? How do you respond? Are you just like, everything? And then they're like, no, you get Peter. Yeah. It's funny. I kind of it's my whole life. My whole life has been like, it's Peter. And so I'm like, okay, I just get it. I assume he's a lovely guy. I love him very much. I'm scared he's going to be hurt and homeless. Right. I worry about him all the time. Right. So a part of me is relieved. I'm like, okay, I don't have to worry about him being hurt and homeless. I love him so much. So I'll figure it out, You definitely will figure it out. I think that's probably, you're obviously a really, really smart guy. But tell me a little bit more. I feel like the word spectrum is good. Maybe you don't. You've heard it so many times, but I think it matters. It's hard to talk about neurodivergence, neurodiversity, because every person is different in terms of their abilities, their functionality. Your brother actually lives alone. He can cook for himself. You say, not well, but he can do it. But you talk to him every day. Your parents, I'm sure, talk to him plenty. He sees people. He can hold down a job. And that's one part of the spectrum. I'll just add one more. He can't really hold down a job. It's more just charity. He goes there, right, and they put up with him for 6 hours a week, 3 times a week. But isn't it true of your career as well, though? Like, don't you have that in common with I've seen your special. I mean, it feels like it was a charity. Yes. Audiences, so funny. I will play clips. Very, very funny. But the point, but my last point was like, then all the way on the spectrum, it's like nonverbal. So how do you talk about autism, the word spectrum, and tell me a little bit more about Peter's functionality now and growing up? I will say first off that people have, not a lot, but some people who are higher on the spectrum or more functioning on the spectrum, let's say, not to make a hierarchy out of it, but people who would formerly be called Asperger's. These are people who are like, can go to college. They would have been just called nerds in the 80s. Revenge of the Nerds is basically a bunch of people with Asperger's fighting jocks. those types of people are like, why are you talking? Why are you advocating for your brother? He's a human being. People with autism don't have a disability. It's thinking differently. And to them, I say that is true for you. My friend's son can't talk. He has to live in a special facility in Sweden because there's no way for his dad to take care of him in America because the wait list is too long for the special facility. He can't live with linoleum or any kind of tile because he'll rip it up and eat it. He's 21. He's never spoken. And his dream for his son is to one day say, I love you to that his son could say that to his father.
And that is so different than your brother.
Well, it's different than these people with Asperger's, is what my point is. They're in college. People like this guy, my friend's son, need advocating for. They need someone who can speak for them. My brother is somewhere in the middle. He still needs someone to advocate for him, someone to tell his story, but he can also help tell his story. So I incorporate him into my show. I tell him about my show. Obviously, I'm talking about him. I get him to call in at the end of every show so people can meet him. He loves it. He loves being the center of attention. But I guess what I'm saying, I think what you asked me is there's a wide spectrum, and why are you talking, and how do you feel comfortable talking about advocating for those people? And I guess I could say that it depends on which person. I would never advocate for somebody who would formerly have been called Asperger's or higher on the spectrum. I didn't ask that, but I think it's a fascinating, I interpret it that way. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine, because I didn't really think about the issue around advocacy and how that might become divisive, or an argument or a kind of ethical debate about when someone needs to be an advocate and when they don't necessarily. So I'm really kind of enlightened by that being an ethical conversation, I guess. I didn't realize that was so much of a thing, but I appreciate that it is. I had no idea, really.
Yeah. It's, I guess you asked me about the spectrum, and I guess a window into the spectrum is letting you know that there are infighting within the spectrum. There are maybe not infighting, but there are
differing views about how to handle.
Yeah, well, I believe that there should be a different diagnosis, and there should be a different word for the people who are neurodivergent, can go to college. We need them in the job market because they help us solve problems because they think differently. A lot of people think Einstein would have fallen on the spectrum, but they just didn't have the test back then. He exhibited like a lot of those traits. And so those people are sometimes like they can't seem to understand that there are. I understand where they're coming from, because it's like somebody like me who doesn't have a disability is like, well, people with autism are like this, and it's like, whoa, wait a second. I'm not mentally handicapped, and why are you talking about me? I get that, but I'm not talking about them. They used to be called Asperger's, but then they found out Dr. Asperger was like a huge Nazi. Then they were like, well, you guys are back in autism. Come on back. You're back. Come back over here. Forget about that guy. You're back over here with us. And,
I think it's super important that people have a language and have an understanding of how to talk about and communicate about the entire experience, issue, whatever you want to call it, without being pejorative, Graham. But I think that it's also interesting to note that you say, and I think plenty of other people say, that a lot of people are getting offended or upset or have opinions that don't have someone they love who is somewhere on the spectrum. So when it comes to comedians, and I know you've talked about Shane Gillis as a new stand-up specialist, as a cousin who I guess has Down syndrome, and he has all these jokes. He uses the R word.
I'll never forget actor John McKinley, who is on my show at SiriusXM, just went crazy about people using that word. He was so angry. His son, I believe, had Down syndrome. My cousin Darcy, who listens, also is a former higher up at Special Olympics, and really was very upset, as many people in the community were, when comedians use the word.
But the point is, a lot of comedians have jokes about it, and a lot of people have opinions. And your point is, you guys really don't know what you're talking about if you don't have someone in your life that you grew up with, that you love. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts around that. Sorry it took me so long to land the plane.
I never apologize for taking too long to land the plane. I think I just rambled on for 8 minutes, but I forgot what the question was. But anyway, the thing about that is, if you see my show, you know that I love my brother. And this is a show about love. This is a show about how much I love this person and how he's not a burden. I'll show you how. Sure, I have to deal with all these problems coming up. Sure, I've had to give everything up, my inheritance, but it's not a burden because I love him so much. It's a relief. He's going to be okay. And this is how awesome he is. I'm going to show you. And I think with Shane Gillis, I have seen that special. I think Shane Gillis is a very funny comedian. I think he's a very nice guy. I think that people can be offended by him using the R word, and that's fair to them. And maybe they should be offended. But at the very least, you can admit that Shane Gillis is speaking. You can tell that he loves them. He loves his cousin, and he's actually taken care of him, and actually has been around people who have a profound disability. You could tell by the way he's talking about it. I know because there's sort of like amongst family members and people who volunteer and people who are paid to take care of people like that. There's sort of like, there's a humor that grows like this is life, and that kind of.
Don't you think that's
attitude.
Don't you think that's true of a lot of comedy and culture, that you could even say, you can tell when a white guy's joking with black people or about black folks, and exactly. That they also have a lot of really close relationships and probably understand voting rights and history and advocacy and the horrors of racism, but they're kind of communicating in such a way. Same with, men about women. I'm certain it's not true of most people, much less artists or folks, talking about anything. But I think that there are similarities when you can almost in a way prove to your audience, listen, I get it, but this is why I find the humor. And am I making any sense?
You're making a lot of sense. I think that a black audience can tell when a white comedian goes up there and talks about black people. They can tell immediately if he's been like invited to the cookout at one point in his life, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Or more. Yeah.
And then it's okay. But if you're punching down or being or people can tell right away when it's not from love, when it's not from a position of knowing.
Let me ask you about your childhood with your brother and what, I know that you share in your show a lot of actual experiences from your life. And I think that's the best part about doing a show like this, is that it's not some academic book or study. It's not even an NPR interview or like this one. It's actually you talking about actual stories, experiences with your brother, things that happened. I mean, and one question I have is, my brother was bullied because he was just a skater, a druggie, a burnout, whatever. And that's because he was obnoxiously offended, according to him, with conformity, which I respected, even though I conformed the hell out of everything, right down to the haircut and the sports. But I watched him be bullied. And I've even gotten fights around that. Did your brother get directly bullied? Did you end up having to defend him? And was there a lot of scraps? How did people treat him, and how did you react to their treatment of him?
That I will have to say that for the most part, no. Luckily, he would always come home from school. He got sent to this school that was for people with disabilities. This is his high school. When he was about 14, that was for people with disabilities, but also bad kids, kids from broken homes.
Behavioral issues because of their situation. Yeah.
So it's a terrible combination. So he'd come home and be like, so-and-so bullied me, this guy bullied me, this, and I was helpless because I was at a different high school. I don't know what they look like. I didn't know you know? So the main thing I had to deal with growing up was public embarrassment from adults, mainly adults. Mainly adults would be like, what is he doing? Because after a certain point, when he stops looking like a kid, when he starts looking like a teenager, and we're big. I'm 6'4", he's 6'2". We had facial hair since we were like 4 years old. He's like, he looks like a man. And people will be like, what is he doing? Get a hold of him.
Yeah.
Make him stop doing that.
Give me an example of something that happened. And then how often did those kinds of things happen? And did you avoid certain spaces and situations as a result of it?
I didn't cope well. I didn't do anything. I just felt awful. That was my coping mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
It was just go good. And I'm better with it now, like with a sense of humor and stuff. But like, he's a big man and he'll walk up to women and be like, I'm Peter Parker. And then he'll like point at his crotch because that's where his belt buckle is that has a Spider-Man logo on it. But they don't know, then he lifts up his stomach and to show the belt buckle. He does that all the time. And I just watch these women go like, oh no, oh, what's that? And then it clicks. And they go, oh, he's a special needs man showing me a Spider-Man belt buckle. He's not going to kill me. He's not showing me his penis. And that used to kill me when I was like 14, 15.
Was that, by the way, a thing that he did repeatedly, that exact type of behavior or something else repeatedly? Like, yeah, here comes the belt buckle bit.
Yeah, I mean, he still does it and it's fine now. I'm like better at coping with it. You're always kind of just watching because it's easier to watch and see if they get it or not. And if they don't get it, then you jump in and you go, I'm sorry, he's, whatever. So basically my whole life is like, I'm buying groceries, I'm holding a milk, putting it in my cart, looking at my brother over my shoulder. Are they gonna yell at him? Is he gonna get arrested? Do they get it? Oh, they get it. It's fine. It's like a lot of that, because he has been arrested because women didn't get it. People, we like he walked up to a woman in a bookstore he went to the special needs program at a community college, a local community college, and he went to like the bookstore on campus and. He's so sweet. He would never touch anyone or do anything sexual, but he is attracted to women and he wants to impress them that he's Peter. His name is like Peter, just like Peter Parker, Spider-Man. He loves Spider-Man and he wants to be like, I'm like Spider-Man. And then I don't know if she didn't have great language skills or what, but she called the cops and he got arrested or by the campus police or whatever. And it was a whole thing and everything is fine, but he was traumatized by it. And he's like, ever since then, he's like, I don't want a girlfriend. Girls aren't for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Has he had any kind of a...
No, he's never had sex or anything like that. He's had a girlfriend in high school. And, it was interesting to watch them because they would it was interesting to watch them be like very close physically. Like they would dance and the teachers would be like, you guys got to leave some room here. And so it's in him like that, that's in him, but
one of the issues is that most people have no idea about someone being autistic and or why they're looking in your car for something. And it could be a billion things that they do that are interested in. People perceive it as a criminal. You said your brother's been arrested more than once. Is always
no. Just once. Just once.
Okay. But that situation traumatized him.
Yeah,
it's women and. Getting back to you in your life, I think and I want to continue. I think what you're doing is very enlightening and educating. And I really mean that sincerely. I think this is an important special because I think obviously comedians have an ability to talk about important issues. That's why I do this show in a way that makes people care about them, in a way, in your case, certainly that makes people laugh and be entertained. And you have a relationship, a life's worth of experiences, reactions, to talk about. And I think that's so important to share with people. But I think it's also important to talk about from the point of view of your own life and what it means for you. And so what does it mean for you, Graham, to have a reputation, to have relationships with women? How do you introduce women? I know that you talk a lot about this in your stand-up act and in terms of dating women. How do you introduce your brother to women in relationships, especially maybe it's just you just met them. Maybe it's a one night stand, which I know you're not opposed to. And the next day, your brother calls you at 10 a.m., right? He calls you at 10 a.m. every day. You just met this girl. You're going to answer this phone and talk like Bert and Ernie, as the two of you do. Like those things, I think, are really important to teach people about your experience.
Yeah, I would say that, if I'm starting to date somebody, if it comes up, I'll talk about it. Like if they go like, oh, how many siblings do you have? You have that conversation with people when you're getting to know them, and I'll be like, I have one, and they're like, what are they? Is he still in Ottawa? I'll go, yeah. What does he do? He's a janitor. He works, 6 hours a week, and I kind of let them go like, oh, and then because I kind of I think it's funny, and then I go, he has autism. He has, he's like really into. I'll list all the, he's really into Spider-Man.
I just got him a Millennium Falcon toy for his 30th birthday, whatever.
Yeah, 30. Yeah, yep. But he's got pretty severe autism. They go, oh, okay. I just tell him it's fine. And with the call, I'll just, I'm pretty protective of that relationship with my brother. I think that if you ever see me talk to my brother on the phone, it's because I like you a lot, and that's what it was like with my ex. Yeah. So
is it a thing? Is it a thing that though? I mean, is it hard to have a relationship? Do you ever think about, if I'm in a long-term relationship, have you thought about having kids and then having your brother to have to take care of and your partner and your kids? Like, how does his relationship with you factor into, if it does at all, I make no assumptions, the relationships that you have, whether or not you want a family or anything like that?
It definitely factors in. It's affected relationships in the past. There's 3 times the likelihood chance that I will have a child with autism than somebody who doesn't have a sibling. Just carry that gene, I suppose. And so that's something you have to discuss. I have had a girlfriend a while back ask for like a genetic test, and my mother was upset because that meant that girlfriend didn't want to have my brother, someone like my brother, and it upset me too. And you have to understand that other person's perspective too. They don't know, and to them it's like a lot, and it is a lot. And maybe they're not, or maybe they're looking out for themselves, and they're doing the right thing for me by proxy, because you want to be with in a situation where you're both in it, right, to win it, I guess.
I was just reading some deep philosophy about how we all always look out for our own self-interest. I was reading, it was Abraham Lincoln studying like stoicism. We always all look out to some extent for our own interests. So
yeah. I don't. Yeah, totally. I get it. I guess I get it. And it's just life.
No, but I appreciate you, that answer alone. I mean, it's the point, to say the least, it's there. It's an ingredient. It's a factor in relationships that has to be addressed, just like anything in life. But in this case, it's your brother and his autism and what that means for me.
Yeah.
If I'm friends with you, if I'm in your life and so on. So just wrapping up, and I could just keep asking you questions about your life and your relationship with him. I think it's really interesting and fascinating. You've been so authentic and vulnerable and funny, and you are in your one-man show and on this podcast that you host as well, which I'll link to, Autastic, A Comedian's Guide to Autism, which you co-host with that guy whose kid is in Sweden, right?
Kirk Smith. Yeah. He's Kirk Smith is a comic. He's a buddy of mine. He has a 22-year-old nonverbal son. Kirk is from Texas. The waiting list is too long. His ex-wife was Swedish, so he can get his kid in his facility in Sweden. And he visits 4 times a year.
Wow.
Flies to Sweden. Yeah.
So
talks to him every day.
That was the kind of thing I want to end on. What your experience has been. You already touched on this. The services and the needs. Like, what do people need to understand about what folks, at least like your brother, and his situation need? What kind of services? Like the community comes together. In Canada, obviously, it's different because they universal health care, which comes with a certain philosophy about taking care of your neighbor. And that's not certainly the attitude I would argue here in the U.S. when it comes to healthcare, much less, like if our neighbors fall, I think half of us would just go over and spit on them at this point. But what are the, kind of some of the obvious services and resources that a family like yours needs, that Peter needs?
That's a really good question, and it varies by family. But I would say that the main thing would be housing and job training and job opportunity. A lot of these adults with the right amount of training can have jobs. They could do stuff. They don't have to, and it's good for it's good for them mentally. It's good for the family. It's good for everybody. But there's just no time to train them. It takes extra time. No time to train the McDonald's manager who's going to be managing them on how to deal with them or whatever. There's there's a lot of things that need to go into effect, but it's better for society because you'll have less people on welfare and more people paying taxes, and everyone wins in the end. Families win, the kids win. It's well, one thing, the other is a minor point, but still an important point, is if that job is somewhere in public, like he's cleaning the aisles at the grocery store or whatever, then the rest of the community and society gets more culture to more awareness around. And that's right. They're not hiding in the back. And then there's less people getting arrested for showing a belt buckle. Well, so that's my question. Anecdotally, I suppose this is really hard to prove. I want to be optimistic and think things have changed. Have we, as a society, you can pick a society, I'm sure it's different in different cultures. I mean, certain cultures and religions and people, they hide their kid if they have any kind of disability, developmental or otherwise. They hide them. Certain families do. I don't want to stereotype. But do you think we've gotten better or worse at kind of understanding and creating awareness so that if I'm at the Red Lobster and this kid is behaving in such a way that it's foreign to me, I can understand immediately and I can support that and understand what this family's, just trying to get out and have a, quote, normal life at night. Do you think we've gotten better? Yes, I do think we've gotten better. I actually do think we've gotten better. And I think a lot of that has happened in the last 5 to 10 years. I think there's a lot more advocating going on. We were the only podcast when we started. Now there's 5 or 10. There's just, it's just people are more aware. I think we are getting better as a society. We just need to keep pushing, and there's a lot more we could do. Have you gotten involved at all yourself, or do you have opinions about politics in terms of how to, elect people who would vote for funding for certain resources? Is that something you think about? It's not. I mean, you have a choice in when you elect somebody. Usually one party wants to pull money out of services and one party wants to keep or put money in. I mean, that's usually the choices you get. Yeah. Same in Canada. We just had a party go in the Ontario government, which is like our state government where Ottawa is, pull a bunch of money out of special needs services. So, I haven't gotten to specifics about which candidates support what in terms of that, but just the broad strokes. Yeah. Well, congratulations on the show, on the podcast, on the one-man show on the podcast, and an amazing career in comedy, which we didn't talk about, but of course you and I and any comedians could talk about forever. And let me just ask you one thing about that. Nate Bargatze's a great guy. I've met him several times. He's a funny guy. He's touring the country, the world, and you're touring with him. So you've been performing where? All over the world in these giant venues? How long is that, right? And how long have you been doing it? All over. I haven't been to. He did Europe and New Zealand and Australia. I did not go on those, but I did go to I've been all over Canada and America, all over America, places that I never thought I would go, and it's awesome. Great. I'm glad. Amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing to perform. And we started. It was 1,500 seat theaters. Couple shows a week and not always sold out. And now we're doing 10, 12,000 seat arenas. We did, we did Red Rocks. It's like, you step on stage and there's 2 monitors on either side of you that are 3 stories tall that have your head on them, like a video of you doing stand. It's crazy. Crazy.
Go see Graham wherever he's performing, certainly at the One Man Show if you're in New York. And I hope that you'll do more dates on that and wherever he's performing. And I hope to talk to you again. And I really appreciate you joining me today. It was great.
Yeah, thanks so much. And follow me on the internet. Follow me on Instagram, Mr. Graham K on Instagram, Mr. MR, then Graham like the cracker, and then KAY. Mr. Graham K on Instagram. I got all my stuff up there. Links to my special, links to my one-man show.
All the links, everything Graham K will be in the show notes for this episode to make it easier.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Well, there he goes. Graham K. What did you think? Check him out. Go follow him on Instagram. Let him know that you heard him here on the show. That would be awesome. And check him out on all of the things that he's doing. His comedy special, his podcast, Autastic, a comedian's guide to autism, and so much more. Please go let him know that you heard him here on the program. Always appreciated. That's all I've got for you today. Go give a review on iTunes and Spotify. Go tell your friends to listen to the show. Follow me on all the social media. And just go to the scroll down at the bottom of the show notes if you're a subscriber on Patreon or on the show notes, wherever you're listening to it. You can see where I am on all the social media platforms. Please sign up, follow, and support. I cannot thank you enough for that support. I love you guys, and especially John Carroll, who writes all the music for today's show. Emmy Award-winning johncarroll.org. Go buy this song. If you haven't, support him. Please take it away, brother. I'll talk to you tomorrow.